in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 26, Paul said, "Therefore, I run thus, not with uncertainty." And here's where I want you to get it. He said, "Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air." I want you to realize something. You've got to fight. Paul said, "Thus I fight." I think sometimes we want to talk about fighting. We want to talk about fighting for our family, for our marriage, for our kids, for our faith, for our community, our church. We want to talk about fighting, but I'm afraid what's happened in the church is that we've just been beating the air. We've just been talking about it, but we really haven't fought any. And there's a difference. There's a difference between talking about fighting and really fighting. How many's met someone that they just want to talk about it? And you knew they always want to fight, kind of. They always want to. When you were in junior high, did you ever meet anybody like that? Guys know a little bit more. Somebody is just, they're always willing to fight until someone really wants to fight, and then they just... I was that way. I was that guy. Yeah, sure, I'll stand up to you until you're ready to throw a blow, and then I'm running to the big guy that I made friends with just for this time in my life, that I could run to someone bigger and let them fight for me. But I think the church has gotten that way. We just want to talk about it. I like the Common English Bible translation. I wanted to share that one. It says this: "So now this is how I run. Not without a clear goal in sight." Deal with it. "I fight like a boxer in the ring, not like someone who is just shadow boxing. I fight like a boxer in the ring, not like someone who is shadow boxing." So before you're seated this morning, will you do this? Maybe not. Will you punch about 5 people around you? Let's see who's got it this morning. And you can announce my title to them as you're doing it and tell them it's okay to punch them, because Pastor said, and punch them and say, "Fight for it" this morning. You got to fight for it, and you can be seated. I want to know how many punched somebody. There was your time. Yeah, that's right. I'm not talking about it. I'm doing it. Need some fighters in the house. How many realize there's some things worth fighting for? I don't know if we totally grasp that. There are some things in your life that are worth fighting for. Let me put it this way. If you want a lasting, healthy, happy marriage, you're going to have to fight for it. It doesn't just come by chance. I know we tend to think it does. I know we think that when we look at someone that's been married 50 years, that man, it just came easy to them. That they found their soulmate, and every day of their life was just rainbows and unicorns and bluebirds and the ending of a Disney movie, but it really wasn't. in order for them to make it 50 years, what you didn't see is there were some things that came up in their marriage, in their life, that they decided we're going to, instead of fighting with each other, we're going to fight for our marriage and we're going to make this thing last. They dealt with the same things that you've dealt with that's broken up marriages, but instead they fought through it. If you want it to last, if you want it to be healthy, if you want it to be happy, there are things you have to fight for. Your marriage is one of them. You've got to fight for it. If you want your faith to last, you've got to fight for it. There's going to be some battles that you have to fight through. How many know that's true? There's going to be some things you've got to deal with, and it's a struggle, and it's tough. But if you want your relationship with God to last over the long haul, you've got to fight for it. That's why Paul told Timothy at the end of his life, as he knows he is about to die, that he's in prison, he sends one last letter to Timothy, and in that letter, in that last little bit, he writes this. He said, Timothy, I have fought the good fight. In other words, it was a fight, and I fought it. I didn't just shadow box this thing around. I fought the fight. If you're going to change your community, you've got to fight for it. How many know that? You've got to fight for some things. And I think we've got too many people just shadow boxing. And we're over there just talking about what we'll fight for. We're talking about it. And we're over there throwing these punches, but we haven't landed any blows. We have failed to get in the ring and fight and do the work that is required in order to fight for it. It would be a whole lot easier if y'all would get behind me and say some amens every now and then. Don't make me come down here and start punching you. I'll show you what I'm talking about. You've got to fight for it. You can't just go around talking about it. You can't just go around talking about praying. You can't just go around talking about reading your Bible. You can't just go about talking about doing something for God. There comes a point that you've got to step in the ring and begin to fight if you're going to make a difference. I was amazed as we has come out of our VBS, and as Sister Brandon is telling you, we had the 104 kids throughout the week that we touched, and just watching it, especially on that Wednesday night of our VBS, as the altars were just filled with kids who came and gave their heart to Christ. And I was thinking in that moment, as excited as I was, there was a realization that hit me that Satan is fighting for those kids. And if all we ever do is just give them this one-time moment and then send them out, they will get beat up and they will get captured. I'm telling you, it hit a realization with me. If we're going to keep those kids for God, we are going to have to roll up our sleeves and begin to fight for them. Because Satan is fighting. So, and I believe this, that our kids are worth fighting for. Come on now. I believe with all my heart that the next generation is worth fighting for. Instead of complaining about, instead of shadow boxing and saying, well, I would do this. You ain't went and do nothing but that. Haven't landed a blow in your life. Man, pastor's preaching mean right now. We're getting to this. It's time to fight. I was thinking in fighting for our kids, there's this story in the Bible that I just love, and when you hear it, you won't love it. because it's kind of sad. But there's a point in here that I just want to hit, and I think we can relate to it. In 2 Samuel chapter 21, it starts out in verse 1. I'm just going to read through this for you. It says, "Now there is a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year." I mean, he's dealt with some things for a while. "And David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered." So David asked God, why are we going through this famine year after year? The Lord answered, "Is because of Saul and his bloodthirsty house, because he killed the Gibeonites." Watch this. It says, so the king called the Gibeonites and spoke to them. He called the Gibeonites, and some of you are thinking, I didn't know there was a phone in the Bible. The New Millennial Translation puts it this way. It says, he texted the Gibeonites. It says, now the Gibeonites, some of y'all will get that later and wonder why they're laughing. Now the Gibeonites were not of the children of Israel, but of the remnant of the Amorites. The children of Israel had sworn protection to them, but Saul had sought to kill them in his zeal for the children of Israel and Judah. I tell you, you got to be careful. Somebody who has zeal but doesn't know how to control it. Who has zeal but doesn't have a firm foundation. There's a lot of people who are out of church because they encountered Christians with zeal without a right foundation and a right knowledge and a right they were just preaching in zeal. I better go on. Therefore David said to the Gibeonites, "What shall I do for you? And with what shall I make atonement that you may bless the inheritance of the Lord?" And the Gibeonites said to him, "We will have no silver or gold from Saul or from his house, nor shall you kill any man in Israel for us." So he said, whatever you say, I will do for you. Then they answered the king, "As for the man who consumed us and plotted against us, that we should be destroyed from remaining in any of the territories of Israel, let 7 men of his descendants be delivered to us, and we will hang them before the Lord in Gibeah of Saul, from the Lord, whom the Lord chose." And the king said, "I will give them." Let me skip down to verse 9, because 7 and 8 have some really hard names. I'm just honest. Names the 7 there. And it says, "And he delivered them into the hands of the Gibeonites, and they hanged them on the hill before the Lord. So they fell, all 7 together, and were put to death in the days of the harvest, the first days in the beginning of the barley harvest." And watch this now, Rizpah. Rizpah was the mother of 2 of the boys who were hung. Rizpah, the daughter of Ai, took sackcloth and spread it for herself on the rock, from the beginning of harvest until the late rains poured on them from heaven. And she did not allow the birds of the air to rest on them by day, nor the beasts of the field by night. We're going to stop right there, and I'll finish this story here in a little bit. But it says, I don't know if you caught it all, but with this famine that's on this land in Israel. For 3 years they've dealt with this famine. For 3 years, and David's asking God, why are we dealing with this? Why are we, we're supposed to be blessed. We're supposed to have the blessings, your blessings on our lives. Why are we dealing with this famine? Why does everything seem to just not be working for us? And God said, look, it's not your fault. What you're dealing with is something that happened from Saul. Saul was overzealous. Saul took it upon himself. Saul tried in his zeal for me and his zeal for the children of Israel decided he would just wipe out the Gibeonites even though the children of Israel had swore to protect them. And because they had swore to protect them, when Saul, in his zeal to destroy them, was going against his promise to them. And they said, look, David goes to him and he says, hey, what can we do for you to make this right? He said, look, here's what we'll do. You take 7 descendants of Saul. You give us 7 men, and we will hang them before God. And I think, man, that just seems wrong. Here's these 7 guys that they're paying a price, not even for something they did. It just doesn't seem right, does it? These 7 guys are losing their life, and it's not even for something they did. It was for the sins of the fathers. It was for the sins of them before. 2 of those guys who died were Saul's sons from a concubine, Rizpah. 5 of them were grandsons. I mean, you think they're paying this price for sins of the father before. And I begin to think it doesn't seem right, but it seems like something that we are, I don't know if you realize this, but this generation that is coming up is referred to as a fatherless generation. We have more kids without fathers in their lives than we've ever dealt with before. We have 70% of the kids in the U.S., their parents are divorced, and of that 70%, 40% of them haven't even seen their dad in over a year. We are dealing with a fatherless generation, and I think what's happened is that they're being devoured by the enemy, and it's not even for something they've done. It's for something that their fathers have done before them. And the enemy's coming in and devouring them and destroying them and taking them, all because of the sins of the father. And you can be sad about the story, and you can complain, you can say it's not right, and it shouldn't be done like this, but this is what has happened. We're seeing the effects of a fatherless generation, and I'm afraid that the church has sat by and has put on their boxing gloves and have gone to a corner, not in the ring, and just shadow boxed and complained about it and griped about it and said, oh, maybe we ought to do this. But they have failed to step in a ring and fight for this generation. Oh, we'll shadow box with the best. Oh, if it was me, who would be scared of that? Nobody. Because that's just shadow boxing. There's a difference between shadow boxing. Whenever whenever I was a kid, man, the movie Rocky would come on. Ooh, man. I would stand in front of the TV. But there would have been no way I would have gotten a ring. I think we've got a church. Uh-oh. That will act like they're doing something. Talk about doing something. But we failed to fight. And we're losing a generation. These 7 guys, 7 descendants of Saul, are hung for his sins. But there's a different character in the story. I don't know if you caught it. Her name was Rizpah. And she did something that seemed odd to others. She decided, those are my boys up there. 2 of them hang in her mind. Those are my boys up there. And yes, they might be dead, but I don't have to, because what would happen, they would hang them and leave them there hanging, not ever take them down, leave them to rot. Let the birds come, let the beasts come, and they would devour them as they're hanging until they are no more at all. Rizpah said, I can't stop them from hanging them, but I sure can fight for them still. And she gets out and she lays, watch, she takes the sackcloth and she lays it on the rock right beside them. And she camps there. 6 months she camps there. 6 months from this season to this season, she camps for 6 months. And it says that she stayed there, and here was the purpose. If she saw a bird coming to them in the day, she beat them off. She wasn't going to let birds come in and devour her kids, even though it looked hopeless. Even though it looked like it was already done. Damage done. She's saying, no, enemy, you're not getting my kids still. And she swatted birds from them during the day. Beasts that would come in the night to go after, she would come out at them. And she would keep the beasts off of her kids all night. She camped there on this rock, and she said, nothing is getting my kids. Nothing. I might not be able to stop the circumstance that they're in right now, but I sure can fight off an enemy from devouring them anymore. And I think we've got to come to a point, church, that we decide I'm fighting for them. And I don't know, because I can't change their circumstance on my own, but I sure can do one thing. I can camp on the rock for their salvation. I can camp out and I can set up my camp and I can stay on this rock and I can lean on this rock and I can hold on, and I will decide that the enemy's not getting my kids at night. They're not getting them during the day. I know there'll be some things, some birds that come after them. I know there'll be some beasts that come after them, but I don't have to let them get them. I will fight. I will fight. I will fight. And I will not let the enemy destroy and devour my kids. I think we've been too passive. I think we've been too worried about how our kids come. Can I just tell you, your kids don't have to be your friend right now. Some of y'all didn't like that. Some of you, it might feel like you're fighting your kids. Get in the ring. Tell them when you go home from church today, you tell them, hey, I'll fight. You want to fight? Yeah, I'm ready. We'll fight for this. There's some friends you ain't going to hang around anymore. We'll fight for this. This is worth it right now. There's some activities you can't do anymore. We'll fight for this. I'm not standing by and watching an enemy devour you anymore. We'll fight for this. Come on. Some of you kids, I'm sorry, but some of you's going to lose your phones. Facebook account just got deleted. I'm sorry. But it's worth the fight. And we don't have to stand by and let them and watch the enemy come and pick away. Pick away. Little by little until they're devoured to nothing. Rizpah said, I don't like the position they're in. Come on. And right now, I can't change the position, but I can camp. And some of you are here today because you had a mama that camped on a rock at night. Some of you are here today because you had parents that prayed, and when you come home late doing something you weren't supposed to do, you walked in hearing your mama crying and praying to God. Some of you are here in this place today because you had some parents that camped and said, I can't change what they're doing. I wish I could, but I can't change their position. They make their own choices, but I sure can fight at what attacks them. I sure can decide what comes in and hits them. I sure can fight the devils that are coming against them at this moment. I can get out I don't know if, I'm picturing this lady with a broomstick. That's just my picture right there. Frying pan something, just going after them. You're looking at wild beast. And she's saying, where normally I would run from it, this woman's saying, that's my kid. Beat them off. Some of you is going to have to deal with some demons that you'd normally run from for your kids. Quit talking about it. Quit shadow boxing. And get in the ring. I know you're thinking, well, what's the point? If I can't change their position, what's the point? I'm sorry about that. Does it really even matter? If I can't change it, does it really even matter what? And I want you to look at this. I stopped at verse 10, but I want you to look at verse 11 at what happens. And it says, and David was told what Rizpah, the daughter of Ai, the concubine of Saul, had done. And watch this. When he heard what happened, then David went and took the bones of Saul. That's interesting. You would have thought he would have went and took the bones of those that were hanging. But he took the bones went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son from the men of Jabesh Gilead, who had stolen them from the street of Bethshan, where the Philistines had hung them up, after the Philistines had struck down Saul in Gilboa. So he brought up the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son from there, and they gathered the bones of those who had been hanged. So now he gets those 7 men that had hung. He gathers the bones of those who had been hanged, and they buried the bones of Saul and Jonathan his son in the country of Benjamin, in Zelah, in the tomb of Kish, his father. So they performed all that the king commanded. And after that, God heeded the prayer for the land. Say, what does it matter? What does it matter if I pray for them when it already looks hopeless? Because that's the tough thing, isn't it? When it looks hopeless and you don't see how, it seems spiritually dead to you. Why I keep praying? Because watch, when the king saw what Rizpah was doing, when the king saw how Rizpah was fighting off the attacks, when the king saw that Rizpah was camped on a rock, and even though the beast would come to try and devour, and the birds that Rizpah fought off with everything, when the king saw it, he said, hey, I'm going to change their position. There's about 3 praying moms that got that. He said, I'm going to change their position from being hung to change their position to at rest. I'm going to change their position. Not only because of what I see in Rizpah, not only am I changing the position of them, I'm also changing the position of the father. I'm changing the position of Saul. I'm changing the position of John. I'm changing the position of the previous generation. Some of you have some generation and another generation that you're praying. Can I tell you, fight for everything. When you fight, you'll change positions in their life. You'll change the position of all of us. Only God can move. And I'm telling you, when he sees you camped out, when he sees you fighting, when he sees you not letting the enemy come and just have that generation, he says, I'm going to take that generation and I'm going to move it into somebody's getting this right now. You have the power through your fight to move a generation, and even the sins of the fathers get moved into. I'm telling you, fight for it. Don't you dare give up. Don't you dare say it's hopeless. Don't you dare say, well, nobody sees. I'm telling you, it might seem like you're all alone camped out there, but the king is looking down and he sees what you're going through. He knows what they've done, but he sees the fight, and all of a sudden he moves in, and he moves in, and he convicts, and he moves in, and he speaks, and he moves in, and he says, I've got a mom, I've got a dad that's praying for them. I'm going to move them into another position now. Some of you are here because you got moved. Because you had a mama and a dad praying, fighting. I'm telling you, it's worth the fight. But here's what I realize, church. When I see this at VBS, those kids don't have mamas and dads praying, fighting. It's our job. It's our job to fight. Because I promise you, Satan's fighting. I promise you, Satan's fighting for them. And it's our job to fight for them. It's our job to quit just talking about it. Well, I need some prayer warriors in this house that will quit talking about praying and decide, I'm putting on my gloves and I'm fighting. I'm landing some blows. I'm not just talking about it. We've got too many people who can talk the talk, but are you fighting the fight? Paul in his last days didn't tell Timothy, I talk the good talk. Henceforth is laid up for me. No, he said, I fought. I fought the good fight. We need people who will fight. Well, will you stand with me this morning? It's worth the fight. It's worth the fight. Our kids are worth the fight. Come on. It might seem hopeless. It's still worth the fight. I wish it wasn't looking like they're spiritually dead, dangling, but I can still fight. I can beat off what the enemy's throwing at them until God changes their position from spiritually dead to born again. And even then I know it's still worth it, so I'll keep fighting. It's worth the fight. I want to do something. How many's got some lost kids? How many's got some lost nephews and nieces? That they don't have anybody fighting for them. How many says, I'll be a Rizpah? I'll stand and fight for them. I'll camp out. I'll camp out on the rock day and night. I'll pray. I'll fight. I might not be their friend right now, but I'll fight. I want to do something. I want to pray for them right now. I just feel led to do this. And I want to pray covering over them. Over those kids. Over that generation. Some of you have multiple generations under you that you got to fight for. And I want to pray over them. Can we do that? Father, right now, God, you see all the lost. Those who are hanging before you, God. That the enemy's coming and trying to devour little by little, sending demons of birds and wild beasts, sending attacks against, trying to devour the generation before. But God, right now, God, I pray a covering over them. As we camp out now, God, as we determine in us to camp and fight off the enemy. God, as we camp out on a rock, the rock of our salvation, as we camp out on the rock, God, and we fight, God, I pray a covering on each and every one that is hanging out there. I pray a covering over those who look dead. And God, I pray that it is through our fight that they come and you reposition them from spiritually dead to born again. God, we give them to you and we fight for them. In Jesus' name. God, we give them to you.